Crossing the desert was a nightmare, but the raiders made it worse. Dust and distrust, the twin sons of Taraxis beat down mercilessly, casting dual shadows that stretched like accusing fingers across the endless dunes. Karev adjusted the sand filter across his nose and mouth, squinting against the glare as he turned to check on his client. 5 days into their journey, and he still couldn't decide if taking this job had been worth the payment. "We need to keep moving," he called back, voice rough from the perpetual dust. "These ridges aren't stable after midday heat." Nizari looked up, her violet skin shimmering with a thin layer of protective secretion that her species produced in response to harsh environments. The adaptation that had saved her life was also what made her so conspicuous, a walking target in a region where anything different was considered dangerous. "Your concept of moving seems to involve increasingly hazardous terrain," she replied, her accent giving the words a melodic quality despite her obvious frustration. "Is this truly the only path to the Meridian Gateway?" Karev suppressed a sigh. "The only path if you don't want to end up in a consortium holding cell, or worse." He gestured toward the distant horizon where industrial smoke stained the otherwise pristine sky. "The monitored routes all lead through checkpoints. This is the only way to bypass them." Nizari's large, iridescent eyes narrowed, the inner lids briefly closing in what Karev had come to recognize as her version of skepticism. Those eyes, capable of seeing spectrums he couldn't imagine, were constantly analyzing him, making him feel uncomfortably transparent. "You're afraid?" she observed quietly. "I'm cautious," Karev corrected, checking the water levels in their filtration packs. 2 more days to reach the gateway if we're lucky. 1 canister each left. We'll need to find a condensation point by nightfall." The unspoken truth hung between them. Their supplies were dwindling faster than planned. The unexpected sandstorm on the 3rd day had forced them to shelter in place, consuming precious resources while making no progress. "My people have a saying," Nizari offered as they resumed their trek, her footprints leaving unusual patterns in the sand due to her distinctive gait. "The longest distance is not between stars but between distrust and understanding." Karev grunted non-committally. He hadn't asked for philosophical insights from a refugee of the Lysarian purge. His job was transport, not friendship. Simple, uncomplicated. The kind of work that let him forget what he'd left behind in the settlement. "Your people have a lot of sayings for a species being systematically eliminated from the galactic record," he remarked, immediately regretting the harshness of his words. Nizari stopped walking, and for a moment Karev thought she might finally abandon the pretense of civility they'd maintained. Instead, her shoulders lowered slightly. "That's why I must reach the gateway," she said. "The evidence I carry could change everything. It proves the consortium falsified the outbreak reports. There was never any biological threat from my kind." Karev had heard enough conspiracy theories to last several lifetimes. The consortium might be corrupt, but it was also the only thing maintaining order on the frontier worlds. Still, something in her tone, a certain quiet dignity, gave him pause. "Save your strength," he advised, softer this time. "The western dunes get steeper." As they crested the next rise, Karev spotted a dust cloud on the horizon, too controlled to be natural, too fast to be a caravan. His heart sank. Raiders. The lawless scavengers who preyed on anyone foolish enough to travel the unmonitored zones. "We need to move faster," he said, reaching back to take Nizari's arm without thinking. Her skin was cool to the touch despite the heat, the texture unexpectedly similar to silk. Their eyes met briefly, mutual alarm creating the first moment of genuine connection between them. "What is it?" she asked, though her gaze suggested she already knew. "Trouble," Karev answered, urging her toward a narrow ravine. "And we've just run out of easy options." The suns began their slow descent, casting the dunes in bloody hues of orange and crimson. Somewhere behind them, the raiders' vehicles growled like hungry predators catching a scent. Night would fall soon, bringing different dangers but also the chance of concealment. For now, they ran, guide and alien, reluctant companions bound by circumstance and the unforgiving desert that surrounded them on all sides. The fractured oasis. The ancient oasis emerged from the desert like a mirage, stubbornly defying the harsh environment. Crystalline formations that resembled trees cast prismatic shadows across a small pool of water that shimmered with an unnatural blue luminescence. Karev approached cautiously, testing the liquid with a specialized sensor before nodding with relief. It's clean enough, he confirmed, watching as Nazari knelt beside the pool. The bioluminescent algae actually purifies the water, one of the few beneficial mutations after the cataclysm. Nazari cupped her hands, the water catching the violet hues of her skin as she drank. "Your world continues to surprise me," she said quietly. So much beauty hidden within such hostility. "Don't be fooled," Karev warned, refilling their canisters. "Everything beautiful here has teeth." The shelter of the oasis allowed them their first real rest in days. Karev established a small perimeter of sensor spikes that would alert them to approaching threats, then finally allowed himself to sit, bones aching with exhaustion. He watched as Nazari explored the immediate area, her movements graceful despite her obvious fatigue. "We've bought ourselves some time," he said. "The raiders will be scanning for heat signatures, but these crystal formations disrupt their equipment. We should be safe until morning." Nazari settled opposite him, cross-legged on a patch of soft phosphorescent moss. "You know much about raiders," she observed. "More than a typical guide should," Karev's jaw tightened. "Experience is a brutal teacher. Yet you chose to remain in this region despite the dangers." Her eyes captured the blue glow of the pool, turning them momentarily azure. "Why?" The question hung between them, unexpectedly intimate. Karev found himself answering before he could erect his usual defenses. "The settlements are worse in their way. Everything regulated, monitored. Every breath counted, every thought potentially seditious." He stared into the water. "Out here I answer to no one. Except clients who pay for your expertise," Nazari added softly. A sardonic smile touched Karev's lips. "Everyone serves something, even in freedom." Their conversation was interrupted by movement at the edge of the oasis. Both tensed, but the newcomers proved to be fellow travelers, a weather-beaten merchant and his two assistants, their hover cart laden with trade goods. "Blessings of the dunes," the merchant called, raising empty hands to show peaceful intentions. "Mind if we share your sanctuary for the night?" Karev nodded cautiously, and soon a second camp was established at a respectful distance. As twilight deepened, the merchant approached with a small offering of preserved fruits. "Hazardous times to be crossing the scorch," he commented, glancing meaningfully at Nazari. "Especially with one so distinctive." "Our business is our own," Karev replied evenly. The merchant nodded, unperturbed. "As is everyone's. But a friendly warning, raider bands have been unusually active near the Meridian Gateway. Consortium patrols too, almost as if they're looking for something." His gaze lingered on Nazari. "Or someone." After the merchant returned to his camp, Nazari moved closer to Karev, her voice barely above a whisper. "He suspects what I carry." "He suspects something," Karev corrected. "In the desert, suspicion is as common as sand." Nazari hesitated, then reached into a hidden pocket in her garments. She withdrew a small crystalline device no larger than her palm. It pulsed with internal light, responding to her touch. "This contains the truth about my people," she said. "Genetic proof that we were engineered by the consortium itself, created as biological processors for their quantum networks. When some of us developed sentience beyond their expectations, they fabricated the outbreak story as justification for extermination." Karev stared at the device, realizing the enormity of what she carried. If authentic, it would destabilize consortium control across multiple systems. "That's why they hunt you so persistently," he murmured. Nazari nodded, returning the device to its hiding place. "Now you understand the weight of your commitment as my guide. Under the alien sky, with twin moons rising behind the crystal trees." Karev felt something shift between them, a fragile trust beginning to form. He reached out hesitantly, his hand stopping just short of hers. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll take first watch." As Nazari curled onto her side, facing him even in sleep, Karev realized with unsettling clarity that she had become more than a client. The implications of that realization troubled him as he gazed out into the darkness, listening to the desert's deceptive silence and wondering what tomorrow would bring. Crimson sand. They left the oasis before dawn, hoping to gain distance before the full heat of day made travel unbearable. The merchant's warning had added urgency to their journey, and Karev set a punishing pace across terrain that grew increasingly treacherous. Jagged rock formations erupted from the sand like the bones of some prehistoric leviathan, creating a natural maze they navigated in tense silence. "Something's wrong," Nazari said suddenly, stopping in her tracks, her head tilted, eyes focusing on something beyond human perception. The air, it's disturbed. Karev had learned to trust her heightened senses. How many? Where? Approaching fast. Multiple sources. She pointed toward an outcropping. There. And there. They had only moments to prepare before the first raider vehicle crested the nearest dune, its modified engines screaming like wounded animals. 3 more appeared in quick succession, circling to cut off potential escape routes. The vehicles were nightmarish assemblages of salvaged metal, decorated with grim trophies, bones and technological fragments from previous victims. "Stay behind me," Karev ordered, unslinging the pulse rifle from his back. The raiders dismounted with practiced coordination, 8 figures wrapped in dust-colored garments that concealed everything except their eyes. Those eyes, however, reflected an unmistakable hunger when they fixed on Nazari. "Quite the prize," called their leader, a tall figure with ritualistic scars visible on exposed forearms. "A Lycerian this far from sanctuary space. The bounty on that purple skin would set us up for a season." "There's no bounty," Karev replied steadily. "Just a traveler under my protection." Laughter rippled through the raider band. "Protection from what? The desert?" The leader gestured expansively. "The desert we understand. It kills honestly. But the consortium? They pay in real credits for specimens like yours." Nazari stepped forward, ignoring Karev's attempt to keep her shielded. "I am not a specimen," she stated, her voice carrying an unexpected authority. "And you would be wise to reconsider your intentions." The leader's eyes narrowed, reassessing. "Interesting. Most Lycerians beg for mercy by now." He drew a wicked-looking blade that hummed with disruptor energy. "Let's see if you bleed the same color as the rest." Everything happened at once. The raiders advanced as Karev fired the first shot, dropping one attacker with a precision blast. Nazari revealed a concealed energy weapon of her own, surprising both Karev and their assailants with her proficiency. The battle was chaotic, brutal. Sand kicked up in blinding clouds as energy weapons discharged and bodies collided. Karev fought with the desperate efficiency of a survivalist, each movement calculated for maximum effect. But they were outnumbered, and the raiders pressed their advantage. Karev saw the leader flanking toward Nazari, disruptor blade raised. Without conscious thought, he threw himself into the path of the attack, feeling the blade slice through his protective clothing and into flesh. White-hot pain exploded across his torso, but he managed to knock the leader off balance, buying Nazari precious seconds. She used them well. A concentrated energy burst from her weapon caught the leader squarely in the chest, sending him sprawling backward. The remaining raiders hesitated, witnessing their commander's fall. "Take him and go," Nazari commanded, her weapon still raised. There need be no more bloodshed today. Perhaps it was her alien presence or the unexpected ferocity of their resistance, but the raiders collected their wounded and retreated to their vehicles. As the dust cloud of their departure faded into the distance, Karev collapsed to one knee, hand pressed against his wound. That was unexpectedly diplomatic of them, he managed through gritted teeth. Nazari was already at his side, examining the injury with clinical precision. "Raiders respect strength above all, and your intervention confused them." Her fingers gently probed the edges of the wound. "Why did you do that? Place yourself in harm's way for me?" Karev couldn't answer immediately, partly from pain, partly because he had no rational explanation for his instinctive action. "Job, requirements," he finally muttered. The look she gave him made it clear she didn't believe him. "The disruptor energy is still active in the wound. We need to neutralize it before it spreads." She glanced around at the unforgiving landscape. "We need shelter." With her support, Karev struggled to his feet. Each step sent waves of agony through his body, but he forced himself forward. The twin suns beat down mercilessly as blood soaked his garment, leaving a crimson trail in the sand behind them. "There." Nazari pointed toward a distant rock formation that appeared to have unnatural geometric patterns. "Ancient ruins. We can find shelter there." As they limped toward potential sanctuary, Karev found himself increasingly dependent on Nazari's strength. The roles of protector and protected had shifted, boundaries blurring like the horizon in a heat mirage. Through the haze of pain, one thought persisted. He had been willing to die for her. Not for the job, not for the payment, but for her. That realization terrified him more than any raider ever could. Night confessions. The ruins rose from the desert floor like the remnants of some forgotten civilization's dream, geometric, structures of a material that resembled obsidian, but caught the fading light in ways that suggested it was something far more exotic. Nazari guided Karev through a narrow entrance, the temperature dropping noticeably as they passed from scorching day into ancient shadow. Pre-cataclysm architecture, Karev murmured, momentarily distracted from his pain by professional curiosity, maybe even older. Your historian side emerges at the strangest moments, Nazari observed, carefully lowering him against a smooth wall. The interior chamber was surprisingly intact, with symbols etched into surfaces that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Failed career path, Karev replied through clenched teeth. Before the desert claimed me. Nazari was already examining his wound more thoroughly, her expression grave as she assessed the damage. The disruptor blade had left a jagged gash across his ribs, the edges pulsing with an unnatural energy that prevented natural clotting. I need to neutralize the disruption field, she explained, removing a small kit from her pack. This will be unpleasant. Karev managed a pained smile. Worse than being sliced open? Considerably. Her eyes met his with unexpected tenderness. I would spare you this if I could. She applied a crystalline substance to the wound that immediately began to fizz and emit a soft blue light. The pain was instantaneous and overwhelming, like being burned and frozen simultaneously. Karev couldn't suppress a hoarse cry, his body arching involuntarily. Nazari held him steady, her cool hands on his shoulders providing an anchor as waves of agony crashed through him. When the worst passed, leaving him trembling and drenched in sweat, he found her face inches from his own, her expression a complex mixture of concern and something deeper. The neutralization is complete, she said softly. Now I can properly treat the wound. As darkness fell outside, Nazari worked with methodical care, cleaning the injury and applying a healing compound from her supplies. Her touch was gentle but confident, suggesting medical training beyond basic field treatment. You've done this before, Karev observed, watching her hands move with practiced precision. My people were healers before we were hunted, she replied without looking up. I was training in xenobiological medicine when the purge began. The revelation hung in the air between them as she finished bandaging his torso. When she finally sat back, satisfaction in her eyes at her handiwork, Karev reached out to grasp her wrist lightly. Thank you, he said, the simple words carrying the weight of everything he couldn't articulate. Nazari nodded but didn't pull away from his touch. Outside, the twin moons had risen, casting dual silver beams through a gap in the ruin's ceiling. The ethereal light transformed the chamber into something almost mystical, highlighting the violet hues of Nazari's skin until she seemed to glow from within. Why did you really agree to guide me? She asked suddenly. The payment was substantial, yes, but hardly worth the risk of consortium retribution if caught. Karev was silent for a long moment, the pain medication she'd administered lowering his usual defenses. I recognize something in you, he finally admitted. The look of someone with nothing left to lose except truth. You've carried that look yourself, she observed. My wife and daughter, he said, the words emerging with difficulty after years of silence. They died in a consortium pacification of a protest settlement. Officially, it was classified as a tragic accident during standard crowd control procedures. Nazari's eyes widened with understanding. So you know the consortium's capacity for calculated lies. I know it intimately. His hand tightened briefly around her wrist. When you showed me what you carry, the evidence, I realized your mission and my purpose aligned more than I wanted to admit. The confession seemed to shift something fundamental between them. Nazari moved closer, until they sat side by side against the ancient wall, shoulders touching. The contact was simple but profound after days of maintaining careful distance. My species communicates emotion through touch, she said quietly. It's been difficult, being cut off from that connection since the purge began. Karev turned slightly to face her, ignoring the twinge from his wound. What would you communicate now if you could? Nazari held his gaze, then slowly raised her hand to his face. Her fingertips brushed his cheek with exquisite gentleness, leaving a trail of warmth unlike anything he'd experienced before. It was as if she transferred not just physical sensation, but the essence of her feelings directly into his consciousness. That, she whispered, is gratitude. Her palm settled fully against his face. This is trust. And then, with heart-stopping deliberation, she leaned forward until her forehead touched his. And this is something without name in your language. The connection between them transcended physical attraction, moving into territory neither had anticipated when their journey began, under the watchful gaze of twin moons in the shelter of ruins older than recorded history. They found themselves creating something new and fragile and precious. When Nazari's lips finally met his, Karev felt as though he was experiencing touch for the first time. Every sensation was heightened, every barrier dissolved. The kiss deepened, carrying whispered promises of healing for wounds far older than the one she had just treated. They came together with the inevitable gravity of celestial bodies, their connection both tender and urgent. Karev's hands traced the constellations of her body with reverence, discovering differences that only enhanced the wonder of their union. Nazari's touch conveyed emotions too complex for words, each caress a revelation. In the heart of the merciless desert, surrounded by danger on all sides, they created a sanctuary of shared vulnerability. For that night at least, the past released its hold, and the future, with all its uncertainties, could wait beyond the horizon of dawn. Dawn's promise. The first sun crested the dunes, painting the desert in hues of amber and gold. Inside the ancient ruins, Karev woke to find Nazari already alert, her fingers tracing the mysterious symbols etched into the walls. The intimacy of the previous night remained between them like an unspoken promise, transforming the air with potential. These markings, she said without turning, they're navigational charts, star maps from before your world's cataclysm. Karev rose carefully, testing his injury. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, testament to Nazari's healing skills. You can read them? Not precisely read, she corrected, but recognize. My people studied similar artifacts found throughout this sector. We believe they were left by travelers like us, seeking paths between worlds. Something in her tone made Karev cross the chamber to stand beside her. The gateway isn't just a way for you to escape consortium space, is it? Nazari's eyes met his, luminous in the growing light. It's a nexus point. According to our research, it can be calibrated to reach any of the coordinates shown in these charts. Her hand came to rest on a particular symbol, including worlds the consortium doesn't know exist. Safe havens, Karev realized. For your people. For anyone seeking freedom, she amended. The evidence I carry isn't just about justice for what was done to my kind. It's about breaking the consortium's stranglehold on interstellar travel itself. The magnitude of her mission suddenly crystallized for Karev. This wasn't simply about smuggling a refugee across restricted territory. It was potentially revolutionary. The implication sent a chill down his spine despite the rising heat. The Meridian Gateway is less than a day's journey now, he said, checking their supplies. We should move before the raiders regroup or consortium patrols expand their search grid. They emerged from the ruins into full daylight, the desert seemingly transformed after the night's revelations. What had been hostile terrain now felt like a path toward possibility. They traveled swiftly but cautiously, Karev's experience guiding them through hidden routes that avoided the most exposed areas. By midday, they caught their first glimpse of the gateway in the distance, a massive ring structure half buried in sand, its surface etched with the same symbols they'd seen in the ruins. Energy occasionally arced across its circumference, visible even from afar. It's beautiful, Nazari breathed. And heavily monitored, Karev cautioned, using his scopes to scan the approach. Consortium outpost to the east, automated sentries on the perimeter. We'll need to time this perfectly. They concealed themselves in a rock formation to wait for nightfall, the final phase of their journey tantalizingly close, yet fraught with the greatest danger. As the hours passed, a different kind of tension built between them, the unspoken question of what would happen after the gateway. Come with me, Nazari said suddenly, breaking the silence. When I activate the gateway, come through with me. The invitation hung in the air, weighty with implications. Karev stared at the distant ring, considering everything it represented. I've been running from the past for so long, he finally said. The desert was my escape, my penance, my prison. I never thought about what might lie beyond it. Nazari took his hand, her touch now familiar yet still electrifying. Some paths can only be seen when we're ready to walk them. Before Karev could respond, His sensors alerted him to approaching vehicles, multiple signatures converging on the gateway from several directions. Consortium forces, he confirmed grimly, checking the readings. And raiders coming from the south. They must have struck a temporary alliance. Nizari's expression hardened with resolve. Then we move now while they're still coordinating. The gateway requires specific activation sequences. I can prepare them remotely, but we'll need to reach the main control node to execute the final commands. They gathered their remaining supplies, the plan forming between them with minimal discussion, the kind of wordless coordination that comes only from profound trust. As they prepared to make their final dash across exposed territory, Karev paused to look at Nizari fully. "Whatever happens," he said, "finding you in this wasteland was worth everything that led me here." Her smile contained galaxies. "Then let's ensure it's not the end of our story." They moved like shadows across the sand, using the lengthening afternoon light to conceal their approach. When the first patrol spotted them, they were already too close to the gateway to turn back. Weapons fire erupted around them as they sprinted the final distance, Nizari inputting commands into her crystalline device as they ran. The gateway began to respond, energy patterns shifting across its surface, the ancient mechanisms awakening after centuries of dormancy. A howling wind rose around the structure as forces beyond conventional understanding were channeled through its frame. Almost there, Nizari called over the growing maelstrom, her fingers dancing across the control node they'd finally reached. Consortium forces were closing in from multiple directions, their superior numbers making the outcome inevitable unless the gateway activated in time. Karev positioned himself to cover their final moments, returning fire with grim determination. "Karev!" Nizari's voice cut through the chaos. He turned to see the center of the gateway filling with swirling energy, a portal forming within the ancient ring. "It's ready. We need to go now." A disruptor blast struck near his position, showering him with superheated sand. He fell back toward the gateway, feeling Nizari's hands pulling him toward the portal. The consortium commander's voice boomed across the battlefield, demanding surrender, promising clemency that Karev knew would never materialize. At the threshold of the gateway, time seemed to slow. Nizari stood half illuminated by the portal's light, her hand extended toward him. Behind her lay unknown worlds, unlimited possibilities. Behind him, the only life he'd known, a desert of painful memories and hard-won survival. "This is your choice," Nizari said softly, despite the chaos surrounding them. "No obligation, no debt." Karev looked back at the approaching forces, then at the woman who had somehow breached the wasteland of his heart. With sudden clarity, he realized the desert had never been his prison. His own grief had. And perhaps beyond the gateway lay not just sanctuary for Nizari's people, but healing for his own wounded soul. "My choice was made the moment I shielded you from that blade," he replied, taking her hand firmly in his. Together they stepped through the portal, the gateway's energy enveloping them in radiance. Behind them, the consortium forces reached the control node too late, their frustration lost in the thunderous collapse of the portal. The desert of Taraxis fell away, replaced by a kaleidoscope of light and sensation. Karev held tightly to Nizari as they traversed the space between worlds, her presence his only anchor in the incomprehensible journey. When reality solidified around them once more, they stood on a cliff overlooking an ocean unlike any on Karev's homeworld. Waters of deepest purple beneath a sky where 3 moons hung in perfect alignment. In the distance, spires of crystal rose from the landscape, catching the light of an unfamiliar sun. "Welcome," Nizari said, her voice filled with emotion, "to Lysirius Prime. One of the worlds erased from consortium records after our supposed extinction." Karev stared in wonder at the impossible beauty before him, then at the even more impossible woman beside him. The journey across the desert had begun with distrust and necessity. It had ended with something neither had dared hope for, a future unmarked by persecution, untainted by loss. "It's..." he began, words failing him. Nizari smiled, understanding his speechlessness. "It's home," she said, "if you wish it to be." On that cliff beneath alien moons, Karev pulled her into an embrace that answered more eloquently than words. The evidence she carried would soon reach others who could use it to challenge the consortium's power. The freedom they'd found would eventually extend to countless others seeking escape from tyranny. But for now, there was only this moment, a guide who had found his own path, an exile who had reclaimed her heritage, and the promise of healing that comes when two souls brave enough to cross deserts find themselves, against all odds, exactly where they belong. The twin sons of Taraxis were just a memory now, their harsh light replaced by the gentler radiance of a new dawn, and in that light, Karev and Nazari turned away from the vastness of the ocean to begin exploring the world they would build together, one step at a time.